Hello, this video we're going to talk about all the vocabulary words that are associated with ecosystems. And we're going to look at this desert ecosystem to talk about the words. The words we're going to look at are ecosystem and species, population, community, biotic factors, abiotic factors, and limiting factors. We'll start with ecosystem. An ecosystem is a community of interacting organisms and their environment. So basically, it's everything that you see in this picture would be part of the desert ecosystem. It would include all the animals that interact sometimes with each other, sometimes with other animals. It would include the rocks maybe that the lizard or the scorpion would hide on. It would include all of the plants that organisms eat or maybe organisms hide within. And it would also include things like the dirt. Maybe the dirt is soft or maybe it's not soft, and that would be a place to hide or not hide. It would include the temperature of the air, whether it's cloudy. It includes everything that matters to the life of the creatures that live within the ecosystem. Now, the next word is species. Species is very specific. A species is an individual organism in an ecosystem. So in this picture, we have a variety of species. We have a coyote, we have a woodpecker, that's hawk up here as a species. We have pronghorned antelope. We have javelinas. We have this snake here, which is different from this snake over here. We have this roadrunner bird, which is, of course, different than the hawk, the woodpecker, or the sparrow. Those are all different species. We have this chuckawalla lizard, which is its own species of lizard. And we have species of plants as well. Ocotillo back here. Saguaro cactus is a species. Prickly pear cactus species. There's some barrel cactuses back here. And there's some varieties of species of grass. So a species is an organism. It's a specific organism. They're always living things. So there's no species of dirt or species of temperature or anything like that. It's the individual living organisms. Now, a population is the number of animals of the same species that live in an ecosystem. So in this picture, we see 2 pronghorns and 2 javelinas, but there's probably a lot more. Maybe there's 100 pronghorn that live around here. That would be the population of the pronghorn. Maybe there's 50 javelina. That would be the population of the javelina. There's probably 5 or 6 snakes in this area. That would be the population of the snakes. Maybe there's only 2 or 3 coyotes. That would be the population of the coyotes. And the population matters because a coyote needs to have a wide variety of things to eat. So there's a little mouse down here at the bottom. He's back in here hidden. If there's not very many mice, if the population of mice is low, that means there's less food for the coyote. So populations of each organism matter a lot. Now, the organisms themselves live in a community. A community is all of the populations of the organisms all combined into one living place. So the pronghorns, they're probably friendly with the javelinas, they're neighbors. They're all part of the same community. The hawk lives here as well. He's part of the community. The coyote likes to feed on the mouse or the baby javelina, maybe the bird if he can catch it. That's part of the community. All of the living organisms are part of the community because they all depend on one another. They might eat one another. They might be eaten by one another. They might just be friends with each other, but they're still part of the community. So a community is all of the organisms that live together in an ecosystem. Then we have biotic factors. Biotic factors are the living parts of an ecosystem that influence how organisms live and interact. And biotic factors are a little bit different from the community because they're specifically related to what matters to these creatures. So for example, if I was this coyote, one of the biotic factors that would matter to me would be the availability of food. So the mice are a biotic factor to the coyotes. Maybe the bushes are as well because they can go and hide in the shade. So those would be biotic factors also. For this little bird here, one of the most important biotic factors is the saguaro. The population of saguaro needs to be pretty high because these birds like to make holes in the saguaro to live. So those biotic factors are important. For maybe the baby javelinas and the baby pronghorn, a biotic factor that's important would be the grass to eat and also the coyotes because the coyotes are going to try to eat them. So if there's fewer coyotes, there's going to be more of these because the babies won't get eaten. If there's more coyotes, there's going to be less of these because the babies would end up being food. So the biotic factors are the things that are living that matter to the other living things. Abiotic factors are similar. They're just non-living things, but they are very, very important. This lizard, for example, likes to sit on the rock and get sun, warms him up. He probably also likes to hide in the cracks of the rock so he can be safe. The rock, of course, isn't living. It's an abiotic factor, though, because it really, really matters to the lizard. The sand is an abiotic factor. The snake might like to burrow in the sand so that it can escape the sun if it's too hot. If the sand is too hard, it won't be able to burrow. If it's nice and soft, then it's good for the snake. That's an abiotic factor. Another abiotic factor would be the sun. The sun always or almost always shines in the desert. That's important to these creatures. So the temperature, which relates to the sun, would also be important. If it's too hot, these guys wouldn't be out in the day. They might be trying to find some shade. So abiotic factors are very important. Some other abiotic factors might be the availability of water. We don't see any water here. There probably is some because all these creatures need to drink water. But if it doesn't rain very often at all, maybe there's less water. Maybe if it rains a lot, maybe there's too much water. Those are abiotic factors. And of course, the wind. When the wind blows here, it blows sand around. That makes it hard for these guys to live. So that would be an abiotic factor as well. Different environments have very different abiotic factors. Now, the final term we're going to look at is called a limiting factor. A limiting factor is an abiotic factor that limits how much the population of a certain creature can be. So this is the desert. One of the biggest limiting factors, of course, would be the temperature, because it gets very hot in the summertime. So you're not going to have a lot of vegetation because it's very hot and very dry, and that limits the number of pronghorn or the number of javelinas, or really the number of all of these organisms, is the heat and the dryness of the desert. Another limiting factor might be these mountains. These mountains might make a barrier, so it's really hard for these creatures, if they wanted to move, they might not be able to get through the mountains. They're not accustomed to walking or living in mountains. So that would be a limiting factor that would limit the amount of the population. So to recap all of these words we looked at ecosystem, and that would be the environment and all the creatures that live together. The species is the individual organism, like the javelina or the coyote or the woodpecker. A population is the number of all of those organisms of the same species. So you might have 50 javelina and 500 mice and 2 coyotes. So that would be the population. The community is all of those populations of organisms that live together in one ecosystem. The biotic factors are the living things that matter to each creature. The abiotic factors are the non-living things that matter to each creature. And the limiting factors are the abiotic factors that limit how much the population of each species could be. So that was your ecosystems vocabulary. Have a good day.